Ancient Egypt seems like a pretty amazing place to live. You've got pyramids, mummies, a rich culture. Sure, it's also in the middle of the Egyptian desert, but still, I would kill to go back in time and visit ancient Egypt. However, after watching this video, I may reconsider. Welcome back, everyone. Today, we are taking a look at the dark side of being a scribe in ancient Egypt. How was the job of scribe any better than the jobs of farmer, soldier, or slave? Join me and find out. Scribes in ancient Egypt held a higher social status than most people, but they were far from well off. This job required an education, which means the children of wealthy families were usually the ones who got the chance to become scribes. But many scribes came from poor families, like our hero Mena. Don't get me wrong, being a scribe was great. They had power and influence. They traveled extensively and they were involved in every aspect of the Egyptian empire. Pharaohs asked scribes to plan cities and keep track of finances. Priests needed scribes to record the stories and teachings of Ra. Scribes also accompanied the military on campaigns to keep track of losses and battle plans. Most of the time, though, scribes worked for a single landlord or pharaoh and helped run estates and farms. Scribes performed vital functions in society and were considered highly intelligent, but they also endured abuse and had a difficult life. I know what you're thinking. Why would a highly intelligent person put up with being abused? Well, unlike today, becoming a scribe was not a simple process of filling out an application. Back in ancient Egypt, the boy who wanted to become a scribe had to start preparing at a very early age. Mentors often took young boys in and trained them for years, teaching them everything from reading and writing to math and astronomy. A bad teacher could crush your hopes and dreams. Unfortunately, most teachers were priests who ran the schools known as houses of life. They were tough, strict, and abusive. Teachers believed that pain makes people smarter. And I can honestly say I have never heard a teacher say something like that in my whole life. Mentors used sticks to beat their students until they bled. And the worst part is that it was uncommon for these mentors to send their students back to their families after years of training, only to take in another student. That means if your mentor thought you weren't good enough, you would end up having wasted years of your life for nothing. When you were done with your training, you were either released to become a scribe or you were sent back to school to learn some more. If you failed to pass your final exams, you could be sent back home without a job. Many young scribes spent decades studying and trying to become official scribes, and many of them failed. This meant that for years you'd be stuck in this cycle of study and exams. But if you were a poor child, your parents would probably want you to stop trying after a few tries. After all, you would have been out of school for years and you still had nothing to show for it. So many scribes were forced to abandon their dream due to circumstances beyond their control. Some people are lucky though, and our friend Meta was one of them. He got the chance to train and become a scribe. It seemed like a blessing, but it was really a curse. Despite the fact that he knew how to read and write, Mena was treated horribly. In fact, he was a modern-day equivalent of a low-level office worker who does everything for everyone but gets no respect. At least office workers don't have to deal with abusive bosses. The House of Life was a strange combination of school and prison. Boys were taken away from their parents at age 7 and locked inside with little food and hardly any sleep. They had to sit on cold stone floors and write furiously to avoid getting beaten. It was a horrible experience, but necessary to become a scribe. That's why when Mena got a job, he thought he would finally be able to rest, but he was wrong. As a new scribe, Mena was assigned to the Temple of Amun in Karnak, a huge complex with many temples, shrines, and administrative buildings. The Temple of Karnak was the center of religious activity in Thebes. And this is where Mena met Jehudi, his boss and the head scribe of the temple. Jehudi was one of those people who believe that they are superior because they have a higher position. He was a terrible person, but typical of ancient Thebes. He bullied and belittled his employees, and he did it to Mena from the moment they met. Mena was miserable, but he had bills to pay, so he stayed at the temple and suffered quietly. But you don't have to suffer quietly. We now live in a world where you can call out bad bosses and companies online and even sue them. If you're being mistreated at work, seek help. Many scribes felt trapped in their job because they could not do anything else. Being a scribe was the only thing they knew. However, if you feel like you are stuck in a job or career path, remember that you're not alone. There are thousands of free courses on Brilliant that can teach you new skills. To succeed in life, sometimes all you need to know is something that you cannot learn at school or university. Life is constantly changing, and the best way to adapt is to learn new skills. What really impressed me about Brilliant is that they offer courses on all types of subjects, from computer science to physics and maths. They have something for everyone. I'm currently taking the Logic Fundamentals course. It's one of the most popular courses on Brilliant, and I understand why. Each lesson is extremely engaging. I'm learning to think critically and solve problems that I would normally find impossible. I'm sure you have seen people online solving impossible puzzles or riddles. Learning logic will help you improve your critical thinking skills. It can help you in everyday situations. You will be able to analyze problems and figure out the best solution. Logic is also great for improving your communication skills. Whether you're giving a speech or writing an essay, logic helps you present your ideas clearly and persuasively. You can try it out for free for 30 days. Life as a scribe in ancient Egypt was difficult and stressful. People in ancient Egypt kept detailed records on nearly every aspect of daily life. This included trade transactions, births, deaths, marriages, land sales, agricultural production, criminal trials, and royal decrees. Scribes were responsible for recording and maintaining this written history, which was not an easy task. The main duty of a scribe was to write down spoken words and preserve them in the form of records. They did this using brushes, reeds, and ink on whatever materials were available, such as clay tablets, pieces of bark, animal skins, or papyrus rolls. Scribes also drafted letters, memos, and other documents as requested by their employers. It was common for scribes to keep their own journals as well, which they used to record personal experiences and observations. While the work of a scribe was essential to the functioning of ancient Egyptian society, it was also quite challenging. Scribes had to be literate, which was a rare skill at the time. They also had to be able to write quickly and accurately, as well as manage large amounts of paperwork. The work was often repetitive and tedious, and scribes were frequently under pressure to meet tight deadlines. Additionally, scribes were expected to maintain the confidentiality of sensitive information and be trusted with important tasks. Being a scribe was both a privilege and a responsibility, and those who excelled in the profession could advance to positions of greater power and influence. Now, I would like to hear from you. Would you rather be a scribe in ancient Egypt or a soldier? Remember to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Here's a question for you. Do you trust the sources that tell you what happened in the past? Here's another. Can anyone control the flow of history, or is it always possible to find the truth? I'm your host, and you're watching this channel. Join me today as we explore ancient Egypt and learn about the secret scroll that was hidden behind the Temple of Karnak. The year is 1000 BC, and our story begins in Thebes, a city of over 100,000 people. Imagine yourself walking through its bustling streets filled with merchants, artisans, farmers, and servants, working diligently to make their pharaoh prosperous. For 300 years, Thebes was the center of Egyptian civilization, culture, and religion. Now picture yourself standing before the Temple of Karnak, a vast labyrinth of chapels, pylons, hypostyle halls, and sanctuaries dedicated to the Theban triad, a group of three supreme gods, Amun, Mut, and Chansu. Amen was the king of the gods. Mut was the mother of the pharaohs, and Chansu was the god of the moon and wisdom. Built by every pharaoh since the 20th dynasty, the temple was enormous, covering more than 100 acres and housing more than 360 columns. Inside its walls were some of the most spectacular works of art and engineering in the ancient world. But beyond those wonders lay a dusty, forgotten place. Deep within the temple, hidden in a subterranean labyrinth of corridors and chambers, lay the Karnak archives, a place where time stood still and secrets whispered among the shadows. There are dozens of stories about the Temple of Karnak. Legend says it was built from the bones of the mythical goddess Hathor, that Alexander the Great prayed there before defeating Persia, that Julius Caesar was assassinated in its halls. But the real stories are hidden in the archives, waiting to be uncovered. We meet Mena, a humble scribe nearing the end of his career. He's seen a lot of things in his time: grain-counting scandals, a haunted funerary scroll incident, and an actual war zone. But he thought he'd finally made it after landing a prestigious position at the Temple of Karnak. He could finally relax and enjoy the fruits of his labor. He imagined long walks among lotus ponds, incense-scented halls, and maybe even a glimpse of the high priest himself. But no, because the Karnak archives, well, they had other plans for him. The archive chamber was a dark, silent vault buried beneath the temple's bustling activity. No windows broke the oppressive darkness, nor did air ever seem to stir in the stillness. Only the scent of aged papyrus and beetles added any character to the space. His job was simple: sort through thousands of decaying records, copy the ones the priests deemed worthy, and burn the rest. Quietly at first, Mena tried to keep things professional. He cleaned mold-off ancient tax rolls with a goat hairbrush. He straightened crumbling scrolls with steamed linen. He cataloged old war logs, bread inventories, even weather reports. But then he started noticing strange things. One day, while sorting through royal correspondence, he found a series of letters from a long-dead vizier. These letters directly contradicted the official court record. According to temple lore, the vizier died gloriously in battle. According to these letters, he faked illness to dodge service and retired to a villa near Aswan. Mena chuckled at the hypocrisy and tucked the letters aside. Big mistake. The next morning, his supervisor, a sharp-eyed priest named Pacer, asked him ever so casually, "Did you come across any documents about Vizier Thaka yesterday? Letters, perhaps?" Mena blinked. "Some letters, yes." Pacer nodded, smiled. "Burn them." "Burn them?" "Yes, they contradict sacred inscriptions." "The gods do not like contradictions, so that's how it was." The archive wasn't just a storage room. It was a filter, a way to shape reality itself. If a scroll clashed with what the temple had carved into stone for public display, it vanished. History in ancient Egypt wasn't written by the victors. It was edited by scribes under priestly surveillance. And Mena, well, he was now one of the editors. He tried to keep his head down after that, but the deeper he went into the archives, the more he realized most of Egyptian history was a lie. Crop failures were reported as miraculous abundance. Pharaohs who died of food poisoning were said to have ascended into the stars. Major temple thefts? Rewritten as divine redistribution of offerings. Even foreign defeats were erased from record simply because the temple didn't want to admit Egypt lost. One afternoon, Mena found a scroll describing a failed expedition to the land of Punt. Half the crew drowned. The rest returned with nothing but a few crates of rotting incense. The scroll was marked "Urgent, do not copy." It had been sitting untouched for 90 years. He read it anyway. Then that night, someone slipped a piece of papyrus under his door. Just 2 words: "Careful, scribe." Mena didn't know who sent it, but he got the message. Now, let's be clear, Mena was no rebel. He wasn't trying to bring down the temple. He wasn't even sure the scrolls he found were genuine. Maybe some ambitious priest had planted them to discredit the viziers. But here's the thing: Karnak was built on compromise. For 300 years, competing temples and local cults had been absorbed into its vast structure. So chances were there were dozens of lost stories, hidden expeditions, and rewritten histories scattered throughout the archives, all of which helped shape Egypt's past. And Mena, well, he loved history. But in Karnak, that kind of thinking got you killed. Because the temple wasn't just full of priests, it was full of informants. Every servant, every acolyte, every incense boy, they all watched. They listened, and they reported to someone. Mena knew of at least 3 scribes who retired early after being caught questioning official doctrine. One of them had simply asked whether Amun-Ra really needed 36 gold statues in his inner sanctum, while villagers starved during Nile drought. Next day, gone, no burial, no scroll, no mention. So Mena did what any sane man would do. He pretended. He played dumb. He burned what he was told. He copied lies with a straight face, chanted the temple oaths, and bowed to idols made of gold while rats gnawed his sandals under the altar. But deep down he crumbled. The final straw came during the festival of Opet, one of the holiest events in Thebes. During this grand religious parade, the sacred bark of Amun was carried from Karnak to Luxor, accompanied by musicians, priests, soldiers, and thousands of spectators. Mena was assigned to document the procession. Sounds fun, right? Until a storm rolled in, wind ripped through the streets, rain poured like a curse. And in the chaos, one of the bearers dropped the sacred bark. Dropped it, the golden shrine of Amun dented in public. People screamed. Some said it was an omen. Others blamed sorcery. The high priests ordered immediate damage control. Mena was brought into a back room. A priest handed him a scroll template. Right. The god Amun danced in his bark and blessed the people with holy rain. The bearers rejoiced. Mena opened his mouth, closed it, picked up his brush, and wrote the biggest lie of his life. That night, something broke in him. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He just sat in his tiny room surrounded by discarded drafts, wondering how many other scribes had told lies like that and how many truths had died in the fire. The next morning, he did something foolish. He wrote a private scroll, just for himself. No copying, no editing, just truth. About the dropped bark, the fake letters, the rigged temple donations, the bribes, the rewriting of wars, the lies layered so deep they were practically part of the architecture. Then he wrapped the scroll in linen, sealed it in clay, and buried it under a loose stone behind the scribes' quarters. Insurance, just in case. But Karnak had eyes. 2 nights later, he woke to footsteps, then shouting, then pain. When Mena woke up, he was in a different room, one with no windows. Just a single oil lamp and 2 priests in black linen. They didn't ask questions, they already knew. You wrote it, one of them said. I didn't share anything, Mena croaked. The priest shrugged. You wrote it, that's enough. Then they offered him a choice. Option 1, exile. Pack up, disappear, go to a border town and spend the rest of his life copying tax rolls for grain farmers. No temples, no archives, no lies. Just numbers. He chose exile. Mena left Karnak the next morning, under guard, with nothing but his writing box and a broken wrist. He ended up in a dusty village near Elephantine, writing merchant receipts and grain logs for boat captains who barely knew how to count. He never returned to Thebes. He never spoke of the scroll again. But he survived, and in ancient Egypt, that alone was a miracle. Thanks for watching. What's your favorite myth from ancient Egypt? Let me know in the comments below and check out my other videos on ancient history. See you next time. Thanks for watching. To become fluent faster with less effort, try our free online lessons at our website. It's a great way to support us while boosting your learning. This video has a special connection to our channel's past. You see, there's a good chance you've heard about ancient Egyptian writing before, thanks to a popular animation series. The series is credited with reviving interest in Egyptology, inspiring thousands of people to learn hieroglyphs. But what you might not have known is that the series creator was heavily influenced by a lesser-known cartoon. When researching hieroglyphic writing, he discovered a show that taught viewers to write in ancient Mesopotamia. It was on a VHS tape, watched on a battered laptop, and it changed his life. Almost 20 years later, he would release a series that inspired millions of its own fans to follow in Mena's footsteps. And now, here we are, making the first ever English-language video on hieroglyphic writing, taught by a living expert. In many ways, it's a dream come true, but it took a lot of work. We interviewed experts, pored through ancient textbooks, practiced writing with real reed pens and papyrus, and even traveled to Egypt to learn from the best. We wanted to show the process of writing as accurately as possible, which meant getting as close to ancient materials as possible. Today, archaeologists are uncovering more kinds of ancient documents all the time. Administration officials aren't the only ones who left written records. Farmers, laborers, lovers, and even children are revealing what daily life was really like in ancient Egypt. So let's do this again. Now that you can read a little bit of hieroglyphic writing, tell us in the comments what other ancient texts you want to see us translate next. Sumerian, Akkadian, Hittite, Old Persian? What should we tackle next? We already have a lot of ideas, but we want to know what you want to learn about too. Hi, this is the host. In episode 2 of our series, you met Mena, a scribe in ancient Egypt. For over 30 years, he'd served the temple, copied documents, and helped shape public history. That is until the evil priest Akhenaten stole the throne and turned Egypt into a police state. You watched Mena escape Akhenaten's purge. You saw him live hand-to-mouth, hunted and heartbroken. And in the season finale, you watched him transform from hunted animal to defiant ghost, embedding truths in his documents, burying secrets in the Pharaoh's own archives. But Mena isn't real. His story isn't either, at least not exactly. We made it all up. Well, okay, maybe not all of it. Turns out we aren't the first to use the idea of ghostwriting as a form of rebellion. In fact, there are whole scrolls dedicated to the concept. But let me explain. You see, we love history. And as a show about history, we think you do too. That's why we created Wondrium as a place where curious minds can come together to explore the past. I mean, look at some of the shows available on Wondrium. You can travel to the real Jamestown colony and learn what really went down. You can join an expert on a tour of ancient Rome and experience its ruins like never before. You can watch experts debate whether a mysterious skeleton is actually Robin Hood, or you can dive deep into ancient Egypt from the pyramids to Tutankhamun's tomb to mummies. But we know that sometimes you just want to dive into an epic historical drama, which is where our exclusive original series come in. Our team spent over a year poring over academic research on ancient Egypt to make sure we got everything from the hieroglyphs to the history to the politics right. All the big moments of Mena's story are based on real events. The oppression, the exile, the fight against the corrupt temple. All the small moments, well, we imagined them because we knew they needed to fit on TV. But we hope we captured the feel of what life might have been like during Egypt's late period. Because here's the thing. History isn't just facts, it's stories. And great stories need compelling characters. So while Mena himself isn't based on a real person, he is based on an archetype that we found in the records. In the historical sources, we kept seeing scribes being punished for writing the wrong things, like a scribe named Pedosurus who tried to hide a false genealogy to protect his friends, or another scribe who used poetry to satirize corrupt officials. These stories stuck with us. So we thought, what if one of these scribes pushed back against the system in a different way, a more personal way, by writing truth into the fabric of Egyptian society itself? That's where the idea of the ghost lines came in. We knew that Egyptians buried their dead with books of the dead, a collection of texts designed to help them navigate the perilous journey into the afterlife. So what if instead of waiting for the afterlife, our hero could sneak messages into the documents of the living world, hiding little seeds of truth throughout the scrolls and records of the Pharaoh's empire? Now, when we started pitching this show, the idea of a humble scribe sneaking messages into ancient documents probably sounded ridiculous. But then we remembered the real-life example of a document from the Great Library of Alexandria. It contains a letter that seems to have been smuggled out of Jerusalem around 70 CE, just after the destruction of the Second Temple. The author writes under the guise of describing mundane things like taxes and olive harvests. He slips in news of a siege, mentions of burnt olive oil lamps, and describes soldiers leaving Jerusalem forever. Most of the letter has nothing to do with the Jewish revolt against the Romans, but without careful reading, the most important parts could easily be missed. In other words, this letter is full of ghost lines. We decided to lean into this idea hard, taking inspiration from graffiti scratched into Roman monuments, letters carved onto temple walls, or even modern examples like the artist Banksy, who incorporates hidden messages into his murals. In each episode of our show, we try to pack the scripts with ghost lines. Maybe it's a comment on the nature of history, or maybe it's just a fun little Easter egg for our favorite type of viewer, the nerdy history fans who watch every episode twice. Speaking of which, there's one more thing we have to tell you. So here's the deal. If you go onto Wondrium and start watching our show, you're gonna watch a lot of ads. It comes with the territory of streaming. And the worst part is these ads have nothing to do with history, not a single one. For 3 seasons, we've worked closely with an award-winning team of historians, Egyptologists, and writers. We brought in consultants. We visited Egypt, we researched everything. But at the end of the day, we still had to cut corners somewhere, and those places are in the details. So if you want to know what Amenhotep looked like, don't take our word for it. Watch the documentary that inspired our costume designers. Want to compare the layout of Akhenaten's palace to ours? Easy. Just ask our production designer and they'll point you in the right direction. What about that scene where Mena uses astronomy to smuggle messages? Well, there's a documentary all about the role of astrology in ancient Egypt. It's 1 hour long. It's fascinating and it's available on Wondrium. This is all just one small part of Wondrium. There are thousands of nonfiction titles available on the platform, along with hundreds of hours of exclusive original programming. And the best part is that by signing up, you're supporting CuriosityStream. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. I'll see you next time. Mena was a scribe in ancient Thebes. He copied words all day, every day, all over Thebes. On temple walls, obelisks, coffins, tombs, boats, and papyrus. Most of the words he wrote were boring, like lists of grain and goats or people selling water buffalo. He didn't care about the words. He cared about the writing. How the letters flowed, how each stroke curved and turned, how his brush glided across the surface of the papyrus. He was good at what he did, better than good. Some scribes said he was born with a magic touch. He could make even tax forms look pretty. Unfortunately for Mena, beauty didn't matter. His job was to write what people wanted, when they wanted, however they wanted. For Mena, it was a form of slavery. He dreamed of being an artist, drawing pretty pictures on temple walls instead of boring numbers. One day he drew a picture on a tax form. He drew 2 birds mating on top of the numbers. The next day, he was flogged in front of everyone. From then on, he only wrote words. He tried to find beauty in the words, but that didn't work either. People paid him for his art, not his stories. Scribes were supposed to tell stories, but the stories he wanted to tell were never his. Mena was born a slave. His parents were killed trying to escape Thebes. He never learned their names, their faces, or why they loved him so much. He grew up in a temple under the watchful eyes of priests. He hated them. He hated their gold sandals and fancy clothes. He hated the way they ate sweet grapes while the other children went hungry. He hated the prayers and the sacrifices and the lies. He became a scribe to make a plan to get back at the priests. He wanted to be powerful, but not like the priests. He wanted knowledge, not rituals. He wanted to use his brain, not his muscles. He learned fast. He became the best student in his school. The head priest noticed. "You are quick," he said. "That means nothing. You are quick with a knife, dog. Do you think you can cut a man's throat?" "I would rather write his name in sand, master." "Good answer, Mena. Then write me a poem about the greatness of Amun." So Mena learned poetry too. He wrote poems about Amen and Ra and all the Egyptian gods. Each word was perfect, each stroke precise, each letter smooth, but not a single word was real. Mena never believed in the gods. He only knew they made the priests happy. When he was 18, he finished his training. He worked for the temple copying holy texts and carving poems. He had enough money to buy his freedom and start his own business. But he didn't want to leave the temple. He wanted to know more, to become a ghost line. Ghost lines were secret scribes who hid anti-government messages in government documents. If caught, they were tortured and killed. But it was better than living a simple life. At least there was meaning. One day, Mena met a girl named Taya. She was different from everyone else. She asked questions. She talked back to the priests. She wasn't afraid of anything except maybe snakes. She laughed at Mena's poems and encouraged him to write stories that were actually his. One day she disappeared. Mena couldn't find her anywhere. He asked around, but no one knew what happened. He was heartbroken. He tried to move on, but every woman he met reminded him of Tia. All the pretty girls were scared of him. He was too dark, too skinny, and too angry. All the ugly girls didn't like him. He was too proud, too arrogant, and too bitter. He was 30 before he found another woman who understood him, a woman who shared his anger and his curiosity. Her name was Nefer, and soon she became pregnant. Mena was scared but excited. Now he had a reason to stay alive, to keep writing and waiting. Maybe someday he would find Tia again. Years passed. Mena got older, fatter and slower. He stopped running, drinking, and partying. He stayed home, working on papyrus. He wrote stories about heroes and adventures, about love and death, about temples and pharaohs. He wrote everything he couldn't say out loud. He hid his stories in walls and pillars and boxes and mummies. He was a ghost line, but no one knew. He kept his private life private. Then one day, a captain from the king's army came to his house. "I know what you do, Mena," he said. "I know you write forbidden things. Come with me." He threw Mena in prison with other captured scribes. They were taken to the royal scribe, a man called Amenhat. He inspected Mena's work, turning the pages slowly. "Where did you learn to write like this?" "By myself, honorable scribe. Your handwriting is everywhere. We found your stories all over town. Who helped you?" "No one, honorable scribe. Be honest, did Taya help you?" Mena hesitated. "She taught me to love writing, but I did the stories myself. And the poems, the ones praising Akhenaten and bashing Alman? I don't remember writing them." "Of course you don't. You erase your tracks well, but you forgot about one thing." He showed Mena a small painting. It was the same painting Mena had drawn on the tax form years ago. Two birds mating on top of numbers. "Very funny, Mena, but how do we know it's you?" "It is my signature." "I never signed my name, only this bird. Why?" "Because we found this drawing in a secret stash of subversive literature. Your friend Toya helped you spread these stories. We know she left Thebes. She went to Amarna, Akhenaten's new capital. What does that mean?" "It means you are a traitor. You will die. But I never betrayed anyone. I just wrote stories. Stories that turn people against the Pharaoh. Stories that mock our religion. Stories that could destroy Thebes. There is no excuse. You will die." Mena saw the hatred in the scribe's eyes. He knew there was no excuse. He thought about Tia. He thought about his wife and unborn child. He thought about his life, his choices, and his art. He was about to die. And for what? He never changed anything. He never made a difference. He was a coward. He was a traitor. He was a nobody. He looked at the drawing again. It was just a drawing. He had drawn hundreds of drawings. Nobody cared about his art. Why did he think he could change the world with words? Words couldn't hurt anyone. He was wrong. Words could kill. And he had written a lot of them. He closed his eyes and waited for the pain. It never came. He opened his eyes. He was in a dark room. He couldn't hear anything. Then a man approached him. "Are you Mena?" "Yes, who are you?" "My name is Nebpet. I work for Akhenaten. The king wants to talk to you." "Why?" "Because you're a great writer. The king needs your help. He wants you to write stories for him." "But I am a traitor. You are a traitor. Toya told me you need a new start. The king gives you a second chance. Will you come to Amarna and write for him?" "Me?" "Yes, you. Will you come?" "Yes, your majesty." Mena knew he had nothing to lose. He had already betrayed Thebes. He might as well finish the job. He followed the scribe out of the dungeon and into the sunlight. He smiled for the first time in years. It was a new beginning. He was still a slave, but now he could choose his master. He would never forgive himself for letting Tia down, but maybe he could make it up to her. Maybe he could even find her again. Maybe she was in Amarna. He hurried after the scribe, eager to reach the capital and start his new job. As he walked, he thought about all the stories he would tell. He would write about brave soldiers and beautiful women. He would write about daring adventures in magical lands. He would write about gods and pharaohs. He would write about anything the king wanted. He was a ghost line, but now he was a ghost line for the king. He was a loyal servant. He was a happy slave.